I didn't think about it, but I might have piggy noises in the background because of Vinny Snuffleball. Oink, 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 oink. This is my first tutorial in my new recording studio space, which is very exciting. The tutorial that I wanted to do first off in this space and like getting back into the groove of making tutorials is like trying to do something fairly simple, but that still has like an elevated kind of feel that's like, doesn't look super beginner, but is still pretty easy. So this morning I did a little sketchbook page of a little cloud. Oh, I don't know what camera to show this to.
Do it to both.
I did this little sketchbook page this morning. It took me about like 45 minutes, so I figured this will take me about an hour. Not too big of a canvas to get started with, but it should be fun. It should be like fairly easy, simple, meditative. Not necessarily a beginner painting, but a beginner can totally do this painting, which there's a couple variations. I'll talk about that as I go along. So we're gonna have this on the side as like our reference photo, but I'm probably gonna make some changes to this as we go along. I'll have up on the screen right now the photo of the final painting, so you can take a little screenshot and put it next to you on your like desktop or whatever, so you can paint along with it. Or you can just like do it along with me, not looking at a picture, which is how I did this one. So, what are you doing? You just gotta go in the little pockets. Look it, right there. She's trying to chew through the fabric to get to the kibble. I know, honey, you got this. You got this. So the supplies we're gonna use today are four rando different paint tubes. So this is my favorite acrylic brand to use just for like my usual stuff. It's Artist Loft acrylic paints from Michael's Level 2. Just is like slightly more pigmented and higher quality, but it's still super freaking affordable. I can't remember how much it is right now. I'll put the price of the thing on the screen. And then I also have Artist Loft acrylic level 1 because I literally lost my acrylic level 2 in yellow. So we're using this one, it's gonna be fine. I have a Liquitex heavy body acrylic in like a red. So the specific colors that I have here are titanium white, cerulean blue, brilliant yellow, and cadmium red. Don't worry about using the exact same colors as me. If you've got a red, a yellow, and a blue, and a white, you're gonna be just fine. And honestly, if you're beginner, you can just use white and blue for this painting. These get a little more nuanced with the color. You're gonna get it, don't worry. I also have an assortment of random brushes, old, ancient, nasty brushes that have been sitting in water for 100 years, so also you don't need really nice brushes either. I just got an assortment of some flat brushes, some round brushes, in slightly different sizes. I also have a little cup of water for acrylics. I need paper towels. I'll be back. Watch the Bendy cam. I got paper towels. I'm gonna set one aside. So this is so we can wipe off our paints when we like switch out colors and stuff like that. Just gonna have one little paper towel sitting right here with me. And I'm gonna put these in my little shelf. And then to paint on as like my palette, I have, what do you call this? Disposable paper palette. So it's basically just like waxed paper that you can put your paints on and then mix them on. I usually like to be a little less wasteful than using single-use kind of things, but for convenience, I'm using them. And then finally, we have a little 6x8 MDF board that has gesso paint on it. You can do it on a like mixed media or watercolor paper sketchbook. You can do it on a canvas. As long as it's fairly the same ratio of rectangle, you're gonna be just fine. Different canvases will have slightly different properties when you're painting, so know that. But we're gonna use this guy today. So let's start by sketching out our cloud. Remember that you don't need to be good at drawing to paint. You can do a bunch of different things to be able to get the kind of layout of your painting on a canvas before you actually start painting. You can use a grid system, you can trace it. I do have a drawing background, so I'm gonna show you how I draw this little cloud on here, also because I wouldn't just leave you hanging like that. So I'm gonna take one of my little round brushes, that guy. Whew. There we go. I need to remember I got 2 cameras. I'm going to do my little brush, just a little bit of water, get some of our blue on this little brush, and I'm gonna sketch out the general placement of our clouds. So I'm kind of keeping this half mostly sky, this half mostly cloud, and it's gonna have an arcing shape kind of like this. So I'm just looking at my reference photo to do that. I'm trying to get my paint fairly fluid. I'm gonna start around the halfway mark on the side. The cool thing about drawing clouds is that they're all different shapes and sizes. Oh, Beanie, you gotta stay on camera, baby. You're my star. Clouds come in all different shapes and sizes. So if you make a little line or a little wiggle that looks slightly different than what you wanted it to be, you can still bet money that it's probably what a cloud looks like. I'm also hunching like a gremlin. Ooh. It's almost like I'm making, in my mind, envisioning like millions of tiny little circles and kind of outlining where the edge of all of that circle clump would be. That's a weird way to explain it. That might not make sense. I'm gonna have some like wispy kind of clouds up here that we're gonna do with some like dry brushing at the end. But just for the sake of kind of getting an idea of our composition. Yeah, okay, so that's our sketch. We don't need anything more than that. It can be messy, it can be super clean, it does not matter. You just need to know the general idea of where it's going. And I might change where I put things, you know, and draw over my lines, go outside the lines. This is just a good idea for us. It gives us something to start with. You also might notice I don't have a palette knife that I'm using for mixing. I'm just gonna be mixing with my brushes. That's fine too. It just means that I'm harder on my brushes and they get caked up with paint on the inside bit where the metal is, and they go bad faster. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of my blue here, more of my white, and I'm mixing them up together. And also, crazily, I'm adding a little bit of this red. So what that does is it mutes the color down a little bit, so it's just slightly less vibrant, which kind of adds a realism to it. And then I'm going to just fill in everything that's not our cloud. And it's okay to go over the lines. It doesn't have to be super clean. So I filled that all in. I'm gonna let it dry for just a sec, and then I'm gonna do another coat because it looks a little patchy, a little see-through in some parts, and I want it to be nice and clean and pretty. The nice thing about acrylics is that they dry really fast compared to, like, say, oils. This is feeling nice and dry now, so I'm able to do the second layer to get this looking super clean and uniform. So from this point, we're gonna start working on the shadows of our cloud, moving to our highlights. So we're gonna start with the darkest colors, and then we're gonna layer lighter and lighter and lighter colors on top for our highlights. And that's gonna give us a kind of blended effect. The color I'm gonna mix up is going to be very similar to the sky color. I want it to be like a similar darkness, but I also want it to be slightly grayer. We're not gonna use black to get this gray effect, because then things start to look muddy. So instead of adding black to get this gray, we're gonna use a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. So here's that color. Grayer than our sky, but not gray. I'm gonna add a tiny, tiny little bit extra water to this, and I'm gonna start filling in the areas that are going to be shadowy. Our light source is coming from this side here. So our shadows are gonna be mostly coming from this side here. Bindi has now crawled under the tripod for that camera, desperately trying to get the kibbles out of the ball. So this color is kind of going into the middle and darkest areas. And anywhere where there's the bump right behind it is probably where a shadow is gonna be. Oh, there you go. New Bindi cam angle. Okay, so with what I have left of this gray on my palette, all I'm gonna do is add a little bit more white, just a little. Tiny, tiny dippy of water as we go from shadow to highlight. So this is just slightly lighter than the gray we were using previously. This is kind of like a very loose, messy kind of painting style. I'm kind of using almost like a dry brush technique once I kind of run out of some of that extra paint, where I'm just scrubbing on the last of what's on my brush on there, and it helps with that kind of blended effect. Tiny little dip of water, and ooh, I did too much of a dip. A little less. And more white. And the same thing, very similar. Starting to get closer and closer to where the actual puff is, where the light is going to be hitting. Adding a little more white, and now we're getting to the point where this brush is going to start to be a little bit too big for the detail I'm looking for. So we're going to be shifting down to a smaller brush size, but while I'm still kind of just covering a lot of area and kind of scrubbing on this color, I'm going to keep using the big brush. Before I move on to working on the more of what the highlights are, I'm going to accentuate some more of these shadows, because also some of them are patchy, like our sky was, that needed a second coat. So I'm gonna mix up that darker gray again. We can always come back and like fix details and change how we approach certain things once it's dry. So don't feel like you have to be absolutely married to whatever choice you made here at the beginning. You can always make changes. Paintings are one of those things where the longer you work on them, a lot of times, this isn't always the case, the better they are. So if you don't like your painting, what you're likely to do, or what your brain wants you to do a lot of times, is to give up, start new, right? Not even bother with something that you don't like to keep working on that. But I've found that if you are not loving the painting you're working on, if you push through that frustration and just keep working on it, like 99% of the time, you're going to end up with a painting that you do like if you just keep pushing through you not liking it. Paintings always look ugly to start, no matter what. This, not very cute, but we're getting there, You just gotta keep working. And now we're going to get to the highlights. So very similar, it's gonna be similar to just taking this shadow color and adding more white and more white and more white. First of all, we're going to be moving to a smaller brush, much smaller than the brush we were using before, because we're going into more details, right? Look at, so much smaller. And the color we're gonna mix up is gonna be similar to our shadow color, where we just kept adding white and white and white. But instead of just adding white to the blue, we're actually going to start to add a little bit of yellow, tiny, tiny bit. So it makes an almost like light minty green color. I know some of you might be like, ew, clouds aren't green. Ew, what are you doing? You don't have to do this kind of like color intricacy thing. You can just stick with your white and blue if you just want like a fully white and blue cloud. That's how you can kind of make this painting easier, is if you kind of just stick to your comfort zone for some of the color stuff. And I'm gonna start painting more on the little round puffs where the light is gonna be hitting. The parts that we avoided mostly when we were doing the shadows, that's the part we're gonna start painting on. And we're gonna start painting it a little bit lower than we think we might actually need. So I'm covering up those blue sketch lines that we'd use to outline our cloud, because in real life, things don't have outlines. So we wanna cover up the little outlines we created. This puff here is actually, funny enough, the opposite of what we're doing. On these puffs, it's actually more shadowy at the tip because it's further in the cloud, so it's not getting as much light as its more outer counterparts, its other little puffy friends. Okay, so that's pretty finished with that color, I'd say. So kind of the same as when we did our shadows, we're gonna add more white and definitely more yellow. So moving forward, again, sticking to the little top of our little puffs, adding in this slightly lighter and warmer color. I think I'm still liking that. Sometimes I like to look back, like sit back for a second, let the paint dry and see what the color looks like after it's like dry, because it will darken a little bit, but I think I'm gonna still keep trucking with this color. So once again, we're gonna go even lighter for our highlights. More white, more yellow, ooh, a lot of yellow. And tiny, tiny little bit of red to just get like a super subtle orange color. So it's getting closer to like a gold kind of color. So you can start to see, because we're only making subtle shifts to the colors as we're moving, it almost looks like there's some blending happening, that we're able to blend our acrylic paints even though they've already dried. There's no actual blending happening, it's an illusion. As I'm going through each highlight layer, I'm taking a little bit more time on each layer that I do. Because the further we get in the painting, the more details we start to add. And the details are what we want to really take our time on and not rush through. Okay, I think I'm all done with this color, so we're gonna move on to one more color change before we do straight white. So I want this color to be more white, obviously. Let's get that in there. More yellow and more red. So this is gonna be the lightest color so far. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. beautiful. Look, you can see the like color variation as we're moving along, so we keep using the last color to mix the new color. Now we're going in with our pure white color and we're changing to an even smaller brush. So this was our brush size. And now we're going to something that's about half the size, I'd say. So take our tiniest little brush, pure white, and we're going to start putting that on very select areas just to like really draw the focus to the highlights. We're gonna be a lot more stingy about where we add these like super bright highlights. This last bit here is what's really gonna bring your cloud to life. For this motion with my paintbrush, I'm kind of doing like almost like a small tap and stroke, so that I have just a lot of control over my brush. I'm not really bothering with like putting it on the canvas and then sliding it. I'm kind of just very slowly tapping on the color that I want. Kind of getting to the point in the painting where you're like 95% done. And everything you have left to do is just tiny little detailed choices that you get to make on what you feel like is best for your painting. Which can be tricky. Sometimes you're scared of ruining it by adding more detail. I sometimes get scared of going too far with my details and ruining the like groundwork I've made. Just defining some more of those shadow colors that I had previously covered up while I was layering my highlights to get just some more detail on this. Kind of emphasize and add to the realism a little more. So I think I'm gonna go back with one more layer of white highlights, but before I do that, I'm gonna do some of the like little wispy clouds back here, which can be very scary when you've worked very hard on a painting for a long time and it's looking pretty good. So I'm mixing up just a light blue with my blue and white. I'm not having very much on my brush at all. I'm like tapping off most of it, so that I can start to just scrub on, like a back and forth motion, some wispy clouds. If this is too scary, you don't have to do this part. It's totally up to you. Okay, honestly, at this point, your painting is basically done. Anything you do past this point is up to you for like details, changes you want to make. You can add a little like bird flying in the background. You can add a sun. You can add more clouds. You can do whatever you want to make this yours. I'm gonna keep pushing more on the details and see how much further I can get, kind of just like, just see how much more I can perfect this painting, and then I'll show you at the end. Ta-da! This is my finished little painting from my sketchbook painting. Oh, turned out pretty nice. Took me about hour and a half-ish. So not too bad, and I could have got it done faster, but I was like taking my time, trying to make it like a meditative, nice thing for me as I'm getting back into like tutorial making, because sometimes I can rush it and then become stressful. And I want this to be just as enjoyable for me as I hope it is for y'all. I do love how this turned out. This is the thing with me, I tend to like my sketchbook paintings better than I like my final paintings. I don't know why. I think maybe I like the loose kind of like painterly nature of a sketchbook painting. And then when I try and finalize it, I'm like, but I captured such a spark at the beginning, but it's a pretty accurate representation of what I originally made. So this is first tutorial back. I've got many more coming. The unedited, non-sped up version of this video is going to be up on my Patreon for all of my patrons. You're welcome to join my Patreon too. It's a nice little community there. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.